Everybody, welcome to Jacob's Quest, and last night we got episode 4 of the Acolytes, and I really enjoyed it. And we got a surprise cameo that I did not catch at first because I had to assume that it was somebody else, but surprise, it was Ki-Adi-Mundi. He was there, we saw him, he even had at least one speaking line, which I believe the line was, "We should inform the High Council." I think that's all he said. And it really wasn't until the credits that I realized, oh no, that was supposed to be him. I thought it was just a member of the same species, but no, it was in fact him. And whereas I and a lot of other people who are enjoying the show really just thought it was like a cool cameo, like, oh look, it's that guy, that's pretty cool. A lot of other people who, you know, are already kind of primed to try to find things wrong with the show because they don't like it, they took issue with a couple things, actually. Two separate individual things. One is really easy to explain, and the other we gotta kind of dive into. Okay, so the first thing is Ki-Adi-Mundi's birth. So in Legends material, it has been stated through various sources, whether it's a comic book or a Topps trading card or some other promotional material that came out for the Phantom Menace, it was stated that Ki-Adi-Mundi did not he was not even born until well after the Acolyte takes place. So how could he be in this show? And a lot of people, of course, are like, it's not canon, they broke the canon, they don't care about the lore, they don't understand Star Wars. Here's the kind of the funny thing about Legends material. Basically back in 2014, Disney came out and said, after the Disney purchase, that the only things that are canon at that point were the 6 Star Wars movies and the Clone Wars TV show. And that is it. So no external materials, none of the comics, none of the books, not even the marketing materials, the little tiny trading cards or infographics for characters in the Phantom Menace, even if they were promotional materials for that movie, those are not canon. The only things that are canon are the movie itself and the TV show itself. None of the books, none of the tie-in novels, none of the visual dictionaries, none of that stuff is technically canon to the current canon that we have. That's all Legends materials. So there's no reason for you to go into any modern day Star Wars project and assume that they're going to abide by what was said in Legends, especially if it's something kind of innocuous like, did you know Ki-Adi-Mundi was born at this year? Most people probably did not know that, so it doesn't matter anyways. That's really the general thing. But some people are still up in arms. They're insisting that oh, it really matters, otherwise you've basically created a different character. That's not Ki-Adi-Mundi, because we know these things about the character. We know that he had 5 wives. We know that he was born here. We know that his species only lives to be about 80 or something. But again, unless it was in the 6 movies or the Clone Wars TV show, none of that is canon. So like, none of those little anecdotes, none of those pieces of information you know about, nowhere is it said that he has 5 wives. Nowhere is it said that his species only lives to be a certain age. None of that is ever said in the material that we're considering canon, so it doesn't, you know, it doesn't affect what we're seeing now. So yes, Ki-Adi-Mundi and his species can live this long. They can be here at this time period, because that's how it works. And I've had people arguing with me all day online about, like, well, it was a tie-in promotional thing for the Phantom Menace, and the Phantom Menace is canon, therefore this is canon. And I'm like, no, that's not how it works. Just the Phantom Menace is canon. The tie-in promotional Topps trading card that you might see going around, that's not canon. Just because it says the Phantom Menace on it doesn't mean it's just as canon as the Phantom Menace is. That's ridiculous. So that's really the first thing that's easy to kind of, let's just say, brush aside, because that's the truth. It's just not canon, guys. That's Legends material. And look, you know, this is like a larger argument, but if you prefer Legends material, that's okay. Like, no one is saying you have to like Disney canon or the current canon or whatever you want to call it. No one is saying you have to like this stuff. In fact, I encourage you, if you are a fan of Legends material and you've read that growing up and that is your version of Star Wars, you know, chase that then. Like just go dive into that, concentrate on that, it's okay. We don't have to be at war here where it's like canon versus legends. It's like, no, just accept that this is a different thing. And it's been that way, by the way, for a decade now. You know what I mean? So like every single time something happens and it doesn't line up with legends, it's like, because it's not legends. It's not. So, and that kind of extends to other things that are probably going to happen in this show. So for example, if they introduce a character and he calls himself Darth Plagueis, guess what? The only thing in canon that we know about Darth Plagueis is that he was the master of Palpatine. That's all we know. He's never been seen. No canon material as of yet has even said what species he is. So even though he was a Mun in the books, that book isn't canon. So just the same thing. It's like there's no reason to go into this assuming that they're going to stick to that, because they have no reason to. There's not like a purpose to that. They can make their own creative decisions and say, no, we're going to go this direction now. Maybe it's for a twist, maybe it's just for some other practical purpose, but they don't have to make him a Mun, because there's nothing in canon saying that he is. And let's just, you know, again, this is a larger conversation, but let's go ahead and go into it. We're here already. Canon in Star Wars, and this has been true even before Disney, this was true during the EU, Legends, whatever you want to call it, canon has always been fluid. And what I mean by that is that something is said one year, and then the next year, something comes out and completely undoes that, or rewrites that, or you have to really, like, do some gymnastics in your brain in order for this to make sense. George Lucas infamously did this many times when he was releasing the prequels, so a lot of stuff that came out before the prequels came out no longer lines up with what happens in his version of the Clone Wars or his version of Anakin. A lot of that stuff doesn't make sense anymore. If you go read Heir to the Empire, they talk about a version of the Clone Wars that is definitely not what happened, you know? So it's kind of funny of like, it's always been this way. Things are canon until they change it, and then that's the new canon. It's fluid, it grows, it's alive, it moves. That's kind of always been how it is, and the only real difference here between Legends material and canon material is that when you're looking at modern day canon Star Wars, you should go in there with the mindset of forget what you know about Legends, because chances are they're not going to completely abide by that. They will definitely pick and choose elements. Like, they like Thrawn, they'll take Thrawn, but it's going to be a little different. They like this, they're going to take this. You know, maybe one day, I doubt it, but maybe one day they'll take, like, Mara Jade, but she'll be different. She won't have the same role, she won't have done the same things. She'll just be a similar character with the same name and the same face, and she'll do similar type things, but she won't be exactly the same. So, and that's been the same case for a decade now, and it feels like if you don't know that by now, if you haven't learned that by now after watching 10 years of the new canon material, I don't know how else to express this, okay? In 2014, the only things that are canon are the movies, just the movies, not the books related to the movies, not trading cards related to the movies, not even promotional material that was related to the movies. It was just the movies and the Clone Wars TV show. That was it. Nothing else was canon. That's like, they did that really clean wipe. It was a really big dramatic moment. A lot of people got really mad about it, and a lot of people are still mad about it today. But again, if you prefer the EU and you prefer Legends, whatever you want to call it, that's okay. There's decades and decades of that material. If that is your universe, I highly doubt that you've read all of it. I highly doubt that you've played all those games. So there's probably still many things you can go do in that universe. It's still there. They're reprinting it, in fact. So like, it's not as if these books are hard to come by. They're reprinting this stuff constantly with new covers and new layouts. Like, it's not gone. I just read a comic book digitally from like 96 the other day, starring Mara Jade. It does, you know what I mean? Like, if it's good Star Wars, it's good Star Wars. Whatever. Anyway, so that's the first thing. Ki-Adi-Mundi's age and his species age. It's a very silly thing that people are caught up on, and it's just not. It's not canon. So this is the new canon. Now we know he's this old. His species can live for this long. We know that much. Update that on Wikipedia. Which, by the way, Twitter people, leave Wikipedia alone. They're doing their job, okay? They are a community-run canon update service, okay? Like, that's what they do, all right? A new canon thing comes out, and they have to update their things. People are, like, acting like it's some kind of gotcha that they had to change it after this episode, but that's how canon works. That's how, like, again, it's a living, fluid, breathing thing. Changes are made, and then you have to go back and be like, okay, this is what it is now. That's how it works. The canon has never been etched in stone. It's always been basically just droplets of water in an ocean that, like, then has to kind of go around whatever new thing you just dropped in that ocean. It's never been, like, etched in stone, and then we have to, like, break that stone whenever something new comes along. Like, that's never been how it is. People like to pretend that that's how it is because in their brains, like, it has to all make sense. All the pieces all have to fit together. But that's never been the case. That's never been the case. They made Splinter of the Mind's Eye, and they released that book, and then Empire Strikes Back came out, and they're like, you know what? Forget Splinter of the Mind's Eye. And that was, like, very early on. That's like year 2 of Star Wars ever, and already we have a case of, like, okay, we made this thing, that's not canon anymore. This is canon now. Like, that happened immediately for Star Wars, so, like, I don't know, guys. At some point, you gotta mature, and you gotta, like, rewire your brain and figure out how this is actually being treated. Like, this is a living, breathing canon. You know what I mean? Like, this is not stone. Anyways, part 1 done. Ki-Adi-Mundi's age, it's a non-issue. It's a nothing burger. If you're still mad about that, you're a silly person, and I don't take you seriously, because you're silly. Okay, part number 2. Now, this is where we really get into the whole Phantom Menace situation here, okay? So people are saying that because Ki-Adi-Mundi is featured in this episode and he sees a hologram of May, who they all discuss must have been trained by a Jedi of some kind, or maybe a separate sect, or maybe a splinter group, as they call it, that means that his Phantom Menace line no longer makes sense. So let's talk about that. Okay, so the Phantom Menace, he is presented with Qui-Gon talking about his attack by Maul, who has a red lightsaber, and he knew the Jedi arts, and, you know, Qui-Gon's like, I have to come to the conclusion that it was a Sith Lord, right? And then, you know, Mace, of course, a Sith Lord, you know? and basically it was just like, oh, Mace is like, I do not believe the Sith could have returned without us knowing. And Ki-Adi-Mundi immediately goes, impossible. The Sith have been extinct for a millennium, right? So that's really the whole gist of it. Qui-Gon Jinn gets attacked by Darth Maul, red lightsaber, clad in black, knows the Jedi arts. He comes back to the council, says, it has to be a Sith. And the first thing the council says, impossible. I don't think they could have returned without us knowing. They've been extinct for a millennium, can't be a Sith. And then they send Qui-Gon off. They send him and Obi-Wan off. Look, go help the Queen back to Naboo. Maybe you'll learn more about your mysterious attacker. Again, they're still not calling him a Sith. They do not even admit that it's possible for it to be a Sith until after Qui-Gon has died. After Obi-Wan is alive and fought this guy and then chopped Maul in half and says, we're pretty sure it was a Sith. Only then do they entertain the idea, like, okay, maybe it was a Sith. So which one died, the apprentice or the master? Only 2 there are. Which, again, that's like another lingering mystery. How does Yoda know about the rule of 2? That's kind of a lingering mystery as to, like, what's going on with that? How does he know that if they're in hiding, right? So, that's the situation we're dealing with. Now, Ki-Adi-Mundi here, the only thing he's seen is May. No red lightsaber for May. And they all kind of come to the conclusion that she must have been trained by a rogue Jedi or a splinter group. And so they send off a group to go investigate this. Now, that group, at the end of this episode, that group has indeed run across a black-clad warrior trained in the Jedi arts with a red lightsaber. So logically, you could say, okay, that expedition group, those people, Saul and all, you know, Jeki and Yord and all those people, they could then come back to the council and say, I think we just ran into a Sith. That's definitely possible. I'll give you that. I think that would be something that they might present. And then, I suspect, that they would be told the exact same thing that the council told Qui-Gon. They would say like, hey, that's impossible. The Sith have been extinct for almost a millennium. I don't think they could have come back without us knowing. So really, you're just kind of coming across the exact same thing that happened to Qui-Gon. And then, you know, like, then the Phantom Menace happens, basically. So I'm not seeing anything here that's contradicting here, okay? Basically, as long as Ki-Adi-Mundi never sees a dark-clad figure wielding a red lightsaber, or no one ever ends up being able to report that to him, then there's nothing here to contradict that. People are acting like he saw a Sith, or someone straight up came up and was like, a Sith Lord is here, we have to tell somebody. Like, that hasn't happened, okay? The Jedi run into all kinds of weird Force users all the time. That's just a thing that happens. If you read some of the books, that's kind of a constant in the universe. So really, it's just up to that expedition group. If they come back, if some of them survive, and they're coming back and they have like, okay, red lightsaber, black clad, knew the Jedi arts, exact things that Qui-Gon saw, and then they report it, and then they get denied by the council that that's even possible, then we might have a situation on our hands. Now, is it possible that we have Ki-Adi-Mundi here because we're gonna kind of change the context of the Phantom Menace? Are we going to actually be shown that Ki-Adi-Mundi knew something potentially related to the Sith? Maybe not really, but kind of vaguely possible, that like, hey, wasn't there that Jedi killer that kind of knew some Jedi training? What if that was something? And then the council is trying to cover it up, or they just deny it outright. Because if you remember, we have Venestra Rowe here, who's constantly worrying about the Senate being informed about something, because our political enemies are gonna use that to attack the Jedi. So you can already see bureaucracy is kind of working against the Jedi here, where they're even keeping secrets from each other. So is Ki-Adi-Mundi part of that? Was he kind of in on this big secret? Like, we're already not telling them about May, so if he finds out about something more, he's going to instantly deny that Sith are even possible. We're not even going to entertain that as a thing like we saw him do in the Phantom Menace. So it's possible that we're going to be putting more context around the Phantom Menace. It's possible that we're going to say that line from Ki-Adi-Mundi actually had a much deeper significance, because that is him being in denial about something he knew about. Something that maybe multiple of them knew about. Are we finally gonna get to that answer of like, how did Yoda know about the rule of two? And that is something that I kind of walked into this show kind of wondering, like, are they gonna dip their toe in there? I don't know if we're gonna see Yoda. I think it's been reported that we won't be seeing Yoda at all, but it's possible that at the very least we're gonna get to that moment of like, there are possibly some Sith out there. Maybe we think that they died here and we decide to not talk about it after this. I don't know. And that's kind of an exciting thing for me. I'm like, they could do several things here, make Ki-Adi-Mundi suddenly a much more significant character, and actually have him have some like, maybe some shady knowledge that he had this whole time and he tried to keep it a secret. Or he just never finds out that a red lightsaber person who knew the Jedi arts was there, and no one ever comes to him and says, I think that was a Sith Lord, right? What if that person dies and they all think it's dead and it's over and we decide to just bury it? I think that's actually a really fascinating direction to go with the Jedi, because yeah, that basically shows how we go from the books High Republic, which happened 100 years before this show, all the way to the prequels, which happens only 100 years from now. And I think that would actually be a really cool transition to be like, yeah, the Jedi were not telling each other everything. They were not telling the Senate everything. They started to become a lot more like, hey, we need to keep secrets. And we think we're doing it for the good reasons. We think we're doing things the right way. But we got to keep this hush-hush, you know? Because remember, by the time we get to Revenge of the Sith, what we're dealing with is Jedi who have decided we have to take out Palpatine. And by the way, they were saying this before they knew he was a Sith Lord. If you remember, they were gonna take out Palpatine before they knew he was a Sith Lord. They were going to arrest him because, hey, he's been Chancellor much longer than his term should allow, and as soon as Grievous dies, he should let go of his power, and if he doesn't, we might have to take control of the Senate. And Yoda's like, down a dark path this takes us. You know, like, we have to be very careful here. Like, that's where the Jedi were by the end of the war. You know what I mean? So, like, if this is the first step to that, if this is like, hey, we know some dark stuff is happening, but we can't let this become public knowledge, because if people know that there are Sith out there, if that gets out, suddenly the Sith become more powerful. You know, people see the Jedi as weak now. Right now, the Jedi are seen as these, like, superheroes. They can do no wrong. They're, like, invincible. But right now, some of us are getting murdered by just, like, an assassin. And if they find out that there's even more to that, that this person knows the Force, that there's a red lightsaber out there swinging around, that suddenly becomes very dangerous for us. Not just because of what that one threat represents, but because of what that means for us on a galactic scale. Suddenly a lot more people are going to start coming for us, because they're like, wait a minute, they're not immortal. We can kill these guys, you know? What is it, Iron Man 2? If you make God bleed, the sharks show up, right? Like, that's basically what we're dealing with here. And that's a really fascinating idea. So to all the people complaining out there that, why would they do this? This breaks canon. First, no, they have not broken canon yet. They haven't done that at all yet. But there's a possibility that maybe they're going to mess with things a little bit. You know, introduce a little bit more context around some of the things that Ki-Adi-Mundi said. And I find that fascinating. That's, like, really cool to me, you know, that I can watch Phantom Menace again and be like, oh, in this moment where he's telling Qui-Gon that, no, not possible, shut up, don't say the Sith word, we don't use the S word around here, not possible. And Mace is like, they couldn't have come back without us knowing, which, by the way, think about the arrogance of that moment also. Mace is like, I don't think the Sith could have returned without us knowing. They think, the Council thinks that they are so all-knowing in the Force that it's impossible for the Sith to have returned. When in reality, the Sith have been there the entire time. They're not even returning, they've just always been around, and the Jedi never even realized it. You know what I mean? So, like, the arrogance of the Jedi and their ability to control their situation around them was kind of astounding when you think about it. But some people don't want those deeper questions looked into. They don't want to dig a little deeper into the Jedi and the fall and how this kind of went in there and how we got to that point in Revenge of the Sith where they're willing to kind of overtake the Senate, and they feel like they're doing it for the right reasons because, again, they were talking about this before they even knew that Palpatine was a Sith Lord. A Sith Lord? They were talking about that before they knew that thing. So, like, when they confront Palpatine, to us it seems justified because we know he's Palpatine, we know he's a Sith Lord, but the Jedi didn't know that at first. They were gonna wait till this war ended and then, like, okay, Palpatine, you're gonna give up your power because we're gonna arrest you and kind of take over the Senate and we're gonna have a peaceful transition, you know, that we're in charge of. You know, like you see, like the darkness there. Anyways, I don't know. I think that this kind of stuff is fascinating if they choose to go that route. Maybe they won't. Maybe Ki-Adi-Mundi will never find out anything. Maybe this whole, like, Sith guy will take out, maybe he'll take out the whole expedition force there and none of them are left to report anything. That's also possible. Or maybe the Sith guy dies and the expedition group says, you know what, we're just not gonna say anything. We're just gonna, he died, the situation is over, it was Chimere or whatever, and he's dead now, and so we're not gonna worry about it. There are no Sith. This was the Sith Master. He was looking for an apprentice. The Master is dead, and it's over. But what they won't know, of course, is that the guy that they killed probably will not have been the Master. That would have been the apprentice, and the Master, Plagueis, or whoever, is still out there. My point is, if you just jump the gun right to they broke canon, they don't know what they're doing, they don't know what they're talking about, you just end up looking really damn silly, I think. So, anyways, that's all my comments on Ki-Adi-Mundi, okay? They didn't break anything, they didn't ruin anything. Just watch the show. You're being you're being real silly. Anyways, let me know what you guys think about Ki-Adi-Mundi. Let me know what you think about the possibility that he actually knew more the entire time, which I think is really cool. But maybe they won't do that. That's okay too if they don't do that. But anyways, let me know what you guys think, and I'll see you guys later. Bye.